All right, Tracy, I'm so excited to have you on today. Thanks for joining me.
Yes, so excited. Thank you so much.
Good. All right. So, you are going to talk to us a bit today about this cool thing you're doing. And I'm not going to reveal what it is. I'm going to let you tell us. But I want to talk a little bit about how you discovered this and got into it, and then tell us about what this elusiveness is, this art that you're doing.
Great. Yes, I'm super excited to speak to you and to give a little background about my story and who I am and how I found this process. So, I am a transformational coach, and I use spiritual psychology to help people connect to a higher power and fall into life flow. So I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. So just to kind of clear that up, I know people have different ideas about what that could be. But the whole way I unlocked this part of myself and use it with my clients is through my own personal journey and my story.
So
So, um,
let's hear it.
yeah. So basically, I was married for a long time to a beautiful soul, my husband, and I loved him so deeply. But I had this little inkling that there was more to me that I needed to discover. I've always been an artist. I studied photography at FIT, and I've always been doing collaging. Through my spiritual studies and work with this collage, I allowed this higher power to blend with my art form. So because I handed this art form over to a higher power, it started to reveal parts of myself that I needed to transform. And one of those was this marriage. What I started to discover was my own sexuality. And though I was pretty happy in the marriage and I was really in love with my husband, there was another part of me that was unfulfilled, that was really pushing me to dig a little bit deeper. And I uncovered that I was a gay woman and that I would be more fulfilled if I looked at this part of myself. And it would have been really easy, if my husband wasn't so wonderful or if there was truly unhappiness there. But because of the way I rely on my higher power, I just had that little voice that kept telling me to dig a little bit deeper. So I call this process conscious collage, and I allowed it to guide me through. And what was so beautiful about the process was the way it allowed me to express my emotions that I was going through. And, when we're all going through hard times, it's easy to kind of block those emotions out and push them down and not want to acknowledge where we're at. But I truly had an outlet for that. And that's kind of what helped me to want to share this work with other people. It's not about being an artist either. I know a lot of people worry, like, I can't really do that. I'm not crafty. It's not about being crafty. In fact, it's really about just carving time away so you can connect to a higher power and have space so that relationship becomes more and more real and you cultivate it over time. So that is the beginning of my journey, and how I really found this work.
Okay, and when I hear you say that you're connected to this higher power to do these collages, I've also heard a lot this word channeling. Is this that? Or how do you explain the difference between those, or are they the same?
Yeah, so I believe that the idea of channeling, and especially that word, people think that this is set aside for somebody with a special gift. And I do think that that might have been true at one time, but I do believe that every person has the ability to connect and channel somewhat. And I think there's a lot of contributing factors to how well you can or can't channel or collaborate with a higher power. My work is definitely channeled work. In fact, sometimes with my clients, when they aren't so much into the crafty side themselves, I take what their goals and visions are, and then I channel an energetic art piece for them to use in their healing. So they'll actually put that up in their home or someplace where they can be reminded, and it does hold this heightened energy for them. through the work I've done on this path, even through finding my sexuality and all that, another piece to my puzzle was finding sobriety. So when I was younger, I had dabbled in drugs, and that was sort of a bigger piece of, I'm from New York, of my New York City kind of story here. But I let that all go, but the drinking kind of held on. And it wasn't that my life was destroyed or I had one of way for me for slowing my progress. And in this past year, I became fully sober of all toxins. And I really do believe this cleared the channel for me to be able to interact with this higher power even more. And my artwork has deepened, and my relationship to this force, this universe, or higher power or divine, whatever you want to call it, just became so much clearer. I've been a seeker since I was the age of about 16. So this has always been an area of interest and something that I knew in my heart was real for me and tangible. But I can't tell you what it's done to be fully clean of those toxins. And I'm not saying people need to go out and stop drinking and all that, but it is interesting to notate how what you're putting in your body can affect, and how your self-care regime is going can affect this divine connection. So I like to tell my clients it's kind of like the difference between a radio signal on a cloudy day and when it's a clear day. So I believe the more I've cleaned my channel and focused on self-care and self-love, the more I have been able to connect on a deeper level.
Well, when I think about creativity, I think of, when we're talking about a higher power, we're talking about a creator. And so to me, as a writer, sometimes I feel like the poems that I get are channeled. They just come through, they're on paper, they're perfect. Like, I don't see areas to edit. And that's not always true. Sometimes I do sit down and write a poem. So I definitely feel the difference creatively when I feel like I'm channeling or connected versus when I'm working on something. Is that an experience that you have and that your clients have?
Yes, I absolutely love that you brought that up, because I will say, I think some of the beauty of knowing when you are channeling is because you have plenty of moments when it's just not there. And that is something at first I would kind of panic, like, oh my gosh, it's not there, it's not happening for me. But I think when I get too much in the flow and it's happening all the time, I need those breaks to remind me that it's a miracle that's coming through, that I am working with a higher power. And I also believe that part of showing up, like when I started this process, I did it every single Tuesday at a certain time. And I always showed up, regardless of if I felt like I was channeling the work or not. I showed up. And I think that this was what I was showing my higher power, that I was willing to invest in that relationship. And, you have to be willing to through these moments. If it's easy all the time, everybody would do it. And this is when faith comes in. Those moments when it's not really there for you is when you get to have faith that for some reason it's not meant to happen today, but you still show up. So I think that's actually a beautiful point, and something to notate for people. And of course, with any art form and any creation, your skills grow over time. So you get better at this, like you get better at anything else. You get more rehearsed. You have your failures that lead to more success. And that's, I think, another really important part of anything in life, is being able to fail at it and just knowing that this is part of the learning process, or it's digging up parts of your emotional being that needed to explore feeling like a failure or feeling like you don't have something to contribute. Like, those are real emotions we collect over time that are, again, giving us the opportunity to process out.
Yeah, and when we had talked before, you told me that you were really using this collaging process to help you deal with some emotions that were kind of stuck. Or talk to me more about that. What does it mean to have emotions stuck in you and processing them through art?
Right. So, when something challenging comes up for me and for most people, we have a tendency to overlook them or just experience them a little bit until we hit that, oh, this is a little too painful. I don't want to go here. I'm going to pack it away. I'm fine. I'm fine. And what this actually does is manifest in a new experience later, someplace else in our life. So if you think of little kids, when they get hurt or they're upset, what do? They fully experience that emotion. I think we've all seen that. They cry and they cry, and then they're done with it. They don't regurgitate that story later. They just fully experience it so the charge can go. So this is what this art form kind of did for me. It gave me a place to keep experiencing those emotions, so that I could fully play them out, so I could get on to the healing portion and to transmute them into something beautiful. I mean, from some of those really raw emotions came such beautiful artwork. And again, it doesn't have to be artwork. It could be where you're working in your career or writing, anything like that. If you fully experience something, and you can bring that into a lot of relationships and a lot of art forms that you're doing because you fully experienced it.
Yeah, I agree. I think creativity is so important, and a lot of us put these ideas on creativity that we're not creative somehow. And yet there's so many forms of creativity that we express every day because it's just part of who we are, that I think we don't fully give value to it. I'm not a great cook, and I know some people who are. They just know what to put together. Like, I watch that show Chopped with amazement because I don't have a clue how that works. And I think it's
Right.
important to have different ways to express creativity. And I love the idea of collage because it's one of those ones where you really can dive in. There's no right or wrong way.
Exactly. And what I found with this process, through working with other clients and through myself, was that there would be things that I would sit down and think I was going to make, like premeditated, and then my eye would be drawn to certain things. And after the art piece was finished, I'd hang it on the wall. It may have been a week, a few days, but then I would start to notice a theme, or I would get the message in the artwork, and it was simply that I followed my intuition. And like you mentioned before, with the cooking or anything else, it's really about falling in the flow more than it is about what you're creating. It's about finding that timeless space. And when we think of a creator, right, if we think of a higher power, they're a creator. Well, we can be most close to that experience by creating something ourselves and allowing for that place of mystery. And that's like, it could be the colors you're attracted to, the themes that reoccurring in your life. And the other thing that this did for me, and that I want to show up for other people, is just like allowing us all to take our masks off. Like, I was exposing what I was going through, which was a challenging time. And there was all these, hesitations around, what will people think of me? My marriage didn't work out. My sexuality, are they going to judge me? All this kind of stuff. But I had this beautiful art form that I was working with, and this other beautiful part of myself. And I allowed people to see what I was going through. And I still allowed myself to show up as healthy, to show up as a happy person when I could, when I was, and not letting any one thing define me. And being undefinable is something that I think is so beautiful too, because you can change tomorrow. It doesn't matter what you've decided, what you're into, who you're with, or what you're doing. That could serve a purpose for as long as it serves, and then that can be done. And not feeling like you have to fit in anyone else's design is something I really found through this process too. That I'm just going to show up as me, who I am today, and let tomorrow show itself to me and who I need to be in that next moment. And I think if we all took our masks off a little bit more, we would all be able to feel more connected and more supported in our vulnerability.
Yeah, and I think part of the masks, and I think you've kind of touched on this as well, is this idea of labels that we attach to ourselves and we hold on to. And even in some of the other interviews that I've done, this has been kind of this theme of, we get this label, we get this diagnosis, we get this victimization, we get something that becomes our identity, and we hold onto it longer than it serves us. So I love that you're saying that and that you question that. And I'm interested in hearing more about how this art kind of revealed to you this inner part about your sexuality. Was that something that you had some clue about and the art revealed it, or do you feel like just going, tell me more about how that came about, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, so pretty much I had that little voice that was inside of me. And, so I was pretty happy in my marriage. So that's the part that was hard for me as a person. It wasn't so cut and dry. I just didn't feel this pull. Like some people have that experience, like, oh, I just knew I was gay, so that's the way I went. For me, it was very back and forth. I would think I would be sure, and then I wouldn't be sure. I would think I would make a decision, and then I would go back on it. And it was really through this process, seeing that I was attracted to the female form, and that even in those moments of like clarity and feeling like, oh, I'm going to stay with my husband, I'm happy here, I'm going to work on it, I was still being drawn to this other part of myself that was demanding my attention. So no matter how happy I was, even if that was 99.9% there, it was like my higher power was telling me, you know what? You deserve to have the 100%. And it's going to take a lot of pain to get there. And it's going to take unraveling everything that you know. But I really felt like I was brave enough to be authentic. And the artwork allowed me to do that. I ended up in the Leslie Lohman Museum of Gay and Lesbian Art while I was still married, because I had been exploring these themes. And it was almost like my divine was so amazing to give me this beautiful coming out party. Like, who would be upset when you're just telling people you're in a museum? Like, that's the most exciting thing ever. So I got to celebrate myself and celebrate. I
think we froze up
was
here.
feel about it.
Oh,
Oh, are we back?
we're back. Yes.
Oh, okay, great. So I was saying that, I wasn't too terribly afraid how my family would take it, or my community really, but it was just the parts of myself that the artwork just was therapeutic and allowing me to gradually become more and more comfortable stepping into this new identity and letting the old one go, and just being undefined in the process.
Yeah, I heard a quote recently that said we were willing to put down what was good for what was best. And when you said, that you had that 99% happiness and you were brave enough to go for the 100% happiness, I think that that's something that does take a high level of bravery, because when we're in pain, we know we want to change. But when things are good, to really say, things are good and can it be better? And what would it take to get there? I think does disrupt all of that. It disrupts all those labels. It disrupts those masks. It creates a lot of fear of, why would I go for more when what I have is great already?
Yes, absolutely. And that's absolutely it. And I hope that people can look at my story and look at places in their life. It doesn't have to be an upheaval like mine. It could be something like switching a job. That's just okay. But you have that little pull that's saying like, hey, I really want to do this other thing that seems a little bit out there, but I want to go for it. It could be even something simple. Like I've always had long hair and I want to decide to cut it off. Anything that you can remember that life is about experiences and about going for that 100% and having a faith in something that wants you to be so happy that it's beyond your comprehension. And I truly knew that whatever I could imagine for myself was only part of what my divine has planned for me. So I decided to have a fuller faith in that there could be something beyond what I could imagine for myself.
That's awesome. I think I had a train of thought and it's kind of left. It was something around the idea of what we feel like we're worth, what we feel like um, is outside our comfort zone that scares us. And I think even you saying the whole back and forth piece, I think sometimes we're scared to go back and forth. Sometimes we're scared to learn what we don't like. And so we just don't try.
Yes. And, thank you so much for reiterating that, because one piece I did also want to say was it took me a long time. It took me 4 years to go back and forth when I kind of knew. So it wasn't instant. And other people, and you know what, maybe I would have been, I made the switch sooner, but I needed the time frame for me and my husband to figure out how we could consciously move forward and keep a loving relationship. And we weren't ready to go any faster. Maybe that was a delay, maybe it wasn't. But I also want people to understand it's your life. You are the one living it, and you're the only one you have to answer to. So whatever feels good for you, and you'll know I feed here and there, but I also knew it was I felt comfortable with. And now that I've made that change and made that shift, I really don't regret any of the time it took. It took the time it took, and that was it. So, sometimes we move faster than we want to, or we move too slow because of outside influences. And, it's good to listen to people's opinion. I'm not saying don't even do that. Like, you have people around you that love you, and that's great. But at the end of the day, it's between you and whatever higher power you feel is guiding you to make those decisions. And we're all on our own timeline. And society pressure was one of the reasons why I felt I needed to get married in the first place. If I would have just waited, who knows what could have happened. But I was turning 30.
I think we froze again.
Oh boy.
Oh, there you are. I heard you say you were turning 30 and you had this society pressure to get married because of that.
Right. Yeah. So, just knowing that sometimes those things are operating in us and we might not even know that they're operating, and really standing in our truth that those things don't need to define us, and we don't need to, again, be in that comparison place with other people and looking at their highlight reel, when we're not seeing all the back scenes that is going on there, in their own life. So just trying to stay true to your path and what that might offer you will probably bring your ultimate happiness.
Yeah, I don't think that we're really in a society that values patience. So I'm really thankful that you said that, because I know that for myself, I get really anxious when I'm faced with a choice and I don't know what decision to make. And usually for me, the best thing I can do is be patient or try each decision to see how it feels. And but that middle ground of not having made a decision is a really hard place for a lot of people. We want it to be one way or the other. We don't like to be in limbo. So I love that you share that the timeline was long and that it was worth every minute, because that is something that I just don't think we value enough. We all want
Yeah.
patience until that's put to the test.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. And what I came to understand at the end was that I was never going to have the sure feeling that I wanted. So, and that was the breaking point for me. It was like I was waiting for this certainty that was never going to come. And then I finally had to decide that making a choice and moving forward was better than staying stagnant, because I had done the time, I had had the patience. And I realized that even if it was a big mistake moving forward, again, I could choose again, but I'll never know if I don't move forward. So sometimes you've got to take that leap, and you've got to allow for life to teach you what it is you need to know. And just, again, knowing that there really isn't a wrong turn. You can take things into consideration. You can take your time, but don't wait for certainty, because certainty isn't always something that you're going to be granted with, especially as spiritual beings having a human experience.
Right. Cool. All right. So what do you think was your biggest takeaway with this whole experience? And I know that it was a bunch of different moving parts, but if you could go back and tell your younger self something, what would you say? What advice would you give?
I would definitely tell my younger self to not be in that comparison mode that we all get into. That timeline thing that we talked about is really a valuable thing. And for me, what I've developed along this course and having bravery is the belief in magic. that we are really underrating the power of magic in our society and the ability to work with forces that we may deem a little woo in our society. I'm here to say that you can for sure work with these energy forces and fall in flow and have a divine magical life if you let go of your fear.
Absolutely. Overcoming fear is like the theme of my life. We really just need to be able to walk up to the edge of it, challenge it, and move past it. And it never ends. There's always the next place of fear, always the next thing that you can step into. So thank you so much for sharing that today. Is there anything else you
Yeah.
want to share before I ask you my light, fun question?
No, I just think it's been so beautiful chatting with you and gaining your insights also. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. I'm really glad that we were able to connect. And I
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing your story today. I think there were a lot of really good nuggets in there that people can grab onto and maybe stick up on their wall in front of them to remember. So thank you
Yeah.
for that. All right. So I'm going to ask, let's see, where is the next place you plan on vacationing and why?
Oh boy, I think that I'll probably end up in Costa Rica because I've got the calling to work with plant medicine once again, and my facilitator has moved from Peru to Costa Rica. So that's probably where you'll find me next.
How fun. Well, that should be great. Cool, cool. Okay, well, thank you so much, Tracy. I'm going to put all your contact information in the video notes so that if anyone wants to get in touch with you, they can. And again, thank you so much for your time today.
Yes, thank you, Chris.